Happy Thanksgiving, everybody. Going into week 12 in the NFL. It is the best time of year. Happy that you're choosing to spend part of it with us, Jared Bailey, joined by NFL Media's Eric Edholm, not Eric Froton, who I called you that like 2 or 3 times the last time I saw you, so I'm glad to get that right. Happy Thanksgiving, buddy. How are you?
Hey, look, anytime, someone calls me a person who looks like a Nordic god, like this blonde flowing hair and I'll take that over my present state. I'm doing well, though. I'm doing all right. I'm looking forward to Thanksgiving, got a little family time and lots of football and World Cup, too, if you're into that sort of thing.
I'm not.
Okay.
I understand
Fair
the
enough.
appeal. Yeah, I
Yep.
understand the appeal. I've just never been a big soccer guy. But yes, no, I understand the appeal. Did you bet on the World Cup? I saw a lot of
No.
people did like pools and whatnot. I don't know how to.
As a law-abiding member of the NFL media, we are strictly prohibited from gambling on sporting events. I want to make sure that's out there in the
Really?
public domain. Yeah, there's some stringent limitations to what we can and can't do in terms of wagering. Like I can go buy a lottery ticket, or I mean I can. I think the rule is I can't. I definitely can't enter a sports book during the NFL season, at least not without concern over getting fired. So I just won't. That'll be my plan, and we'll go forward with that. So I want to be a good company man. That's sort of my thing these days.
I did not know that. See,
Yeah.
you're teaching me things already. And I think that the 6 teams in action tomorrow will teach us a thing or two about where the rest of the season's going.
Yeah.
It's an interesting slate of games. Buffalo will play their second game in Detroit in 5 days. They're 9.5-point favorites. Buffalo, I mean, it's been a weird stretch for the Bills, but I've been very adamant on saying I think that every team that wants to go somewhere, I think, needs to hit some sort of adversity.
Yeah.
We've seen the past few Super Bowl champions, and when we saw the Rams last year, who went winless in November. The Bucks got humiliated in 2020 on Sunday Night Football, 38-3 at home. So I do think that this could be somewhat of a blessing in disguise. With the Jets loss and the Vikings loss, they rebound against Cleveland, and now they face a Lions team that's won 3 straight games for the first time. I think since 2017.
That's right.
Or something like that. That's
Yep.
absolutely absurd. What are your thoughts on this? I think it'll be fun. The Lions are that bad team that everybody just really roots for, and was a lot of fun in the offseason with Hard Knocks and everything.
Mm-hmm.
But this one will be, I mean, once the family starts getting there, the NFL Today will be on at noon, and then we'll probably see Josh Allen and Gabe Davis erupt against a Lions secondary that is very hit and miss.
Yeah, I mean, I'm with you on the adversity part, and I full disclosure, I picked the Bills to win the Super Bowl in the off season, and I'm not gonna change it yet. We had our midseason do over, if you will. Okay, knowing what we know now, who do you think's gonna win it? And my thing was, unless they're out of contention, I'm sticking with my original pick, and I do appreciate the fact that they've taken some hits on defense and been able to play pretty well on that side of the ball. I know the Vikings scored, 33 against them or whatever, but for the most part, they've kept teams to 20 points and under almost the entire season. So you have to respect that side of the ball. They've turned, Devin Singletary into a really good player. Gabe Davis, you mentioned, obviously Diggs, I think was not quite himself last year, as great as the Bills were. He's, really obviously had a nice year. And Allen, there was some real concern a few weeks ago. I, totally understood where that came from, right? If you're dealing with an elbow injury, okay, now we're worried, right? This goes beyond adversity, but I like the way they bounce back. I mean, they still move the ball against the Vikings. If they make any one of 5 or 6 different plays in that game, either knocking the ball down on 4th down, converting the sneak, scoring a touchdown in overtime, what have you, they win the game. And so there were, this was as fluky a win for the Vikings in some ways as the Patriots beating the Falcons in the Super Bowl a few years ago. So not the comeback, but just a number of bizarre things. I still feel pretty good about this team. But as you mentioned, the Lions have obviously, pulled themselves up again after that bottoming out, that terrible game at New England. And really hitting the skids on both sides of the ball, but defensively, they had to fire a coach and everything. I'm glad that they're playing more competitive football. I watched a lot of last week's game against the Giants, and you see some of those young players they've drafted kind of really start to assert themselves. So I think we get a decent game, but the Bills are obviously a higher class of operation right now.
Yeah, I mean, the Lions have looked at least more competitive over the last month or so. I mean, they're starting to let Aiden Hutchinson play standing up, which I think has been a big benefit for them. Kirby Joseph has emerged as a really good player for them. He's had 3 interceptions in 3 consecutive games, so he's been playing really well. But cornerback wise, I mean, it's Mike Hughes, it's Jeff Okudah has been nice, but outside of that, I mean, it is very. We'll see. I think that Amon-Ra St. Brown will make his presence known. Jared Goff's actually been pretty solid when St. Brown plays, so it'll be at least a competitive game that I'm looking forward to seeing. I would go into the prop bets I have, but I'm not going to risk your job, Eric Edholm. So
you can say them, you can tell them, and I can give thoughts about them. I just can't give people betting advice. That's really like the restriction. So I'm curious now, what props are you hitting for that one?
Gabe Davis anytime touchdowns plus 125, and I feel like he's been. Verderam and I talked about this a few weeks ago. Like, he doesn't get a ton of catches, but when he does, they're for like a boatload of yards all the time.
Right.
And against the Lions secondary that we already touched on, they're not going to be able to key in on all of the playmakers for Buffalo. I think that Gabe Davis gets at least one chunk play, probably, especially when they get down in the red zone. Like, pay attention to him. So I think that Davis plus 125 at anytime touchdowns one that I definitely ran to.
Yeah, and I just, the thing with Davis is I'd love to see him just be a little bit more consistent. Like, he's on pace to blow past the numbers he put up last year, yards per catch, touchdowns, total yard. I think he's already passed his total yards mark. I'm not 100% sure, but I wish
he probably did that against Pittsburgh alone whenever he just received for 1 trillion yards against their secondary
on 4 catches or whatever it was.
Yeah.
I mean, and that's the thing. It's sometimes the volume isn't there, but he's got to prove to be a little bbit more reliable. But no doubt, he's a big play threat.
I think it was Greg Rosenthal was talking about this on around the NFL, like being the 9.5 is an interesting number. Buffalo's gotten a lot of those big numbers this year, which I get. Buffalo is to many the best team in football. Detroit, though, I think it can be one of those things where, Buffalo is leading by 16 the last drive. They're going to be playing very conservative, just trying to get out of there and go eat. And then Jared Goff gets it to Jamal Williams with 13 seconds left to cover. So that's one of the ones where if you want to go tease it with a few other games, then go for it. But I think I would, in terms of the money and the spread and whatever, I think the only thing I'm betting for that is if I go alt spread or if we throw just money line into another 4-leg parlay.
Right.
So
you're right, though. They definitely have had games where they've been down and then stormed back only to fall a little bit short.
They did a week 1 against Philadelphia.
Philly, maybe the Vikings game too, if I recall, was pretty tight. And then
those two teams never play a normal game, by the way.
Seattle, another non-normal team. I think they had the same kind of thing in that crazy shootout and everything. But it's that. Yeah, you got to be careful with the Lions. They can break your heart in a number of ways. So I'll leave it at that.
The Lions just always have those games in the middle of the year that you don't think are going to be good. Like they did it a decade ago with Brady Quinn and Matthew Stafford, and then this year with Jared Goff and Geno Smith. Pay attention to the Detroit Lions whenever
they're the you snooze you lose team, the classic. Right when you tune out, that's when they play their best.
Speaking of snoozing, the New York Giants, their past 2 games, they start off 7-1. I think that everybody was just kind of waiting for the roof to cave in on the Giants. They are such a weird enigma of a team. They're 7-2 right now, or 7-3. 7-3. So. But they're 29th in DVOA, which is absurd. But you look at what Wink Martindale has meant to them this season, bringing him over. Their fourth quarter defense has been fantastic. They're going to play hard in the second half. I think it's just putting together an entire body of work that has kind of escaped them a little bit. And then Wan'Dale Robinson goes down with the torn ACL. That doesn't help their cause. I think this is going to be a game where if the Giants can run the ball, it'll be close. But if Dallas stuffs them at the line of scrimmage, this could be over by halftime. I don't think there's going to be much of an in-between with this one.
Yeah, you're right. And to that formula that's been so successful where they keep the game close. And like you said, they kind of win the fourth quarter and play great situational football. You know, the Lions, it was impressive. They took that out of them, right? They removed that from the equation. They pretty much controlled the game from about the mid-second quarter on. Another game that I ended up watching quite a bit of live, and then went back and watched a little bit of some of it. But, you know, and then the other part of the equation that has allowed them to win games this year is winning the turnover battle. And Daniel Jones has 2 picks, and, you know, both of them you could say, or at least partially his fault, if not all. So, you know, it just, I wouldn't read too much into last week's game, but obviously, like, as you pointed out, that's probably a little bit closer to A, what we expected, and B, what the new normal might be. Plus, you know, even though they played well early against Dallas last time, you know, they let Cooper Rush beat them. And, you know, I mean, now they got to go to Dallas, do it on a short week. Dak's back, obviously. We've seen, you know, some great stuff from him at times since he's been back. And, you know, the Tony Pollard element too. I mean, he's obviously broken out in a big way, but all those injuries, offensive line, receiver, corner, you know, they're down 2 corners as well. I mean, they're just gutted right now. And I mean, I would even go so far as to say the first game may be more competitive than this one if, you know, the Giants don't make a few surprise plays like special teams or, you know, a turnover that results in points or something like that.
Yeah, and like you said, like I couldn't name who's starting for them at cornerback this week. Like they're just gutted on that side of the ball.
Cordell Flott, maybe the 3rd rounder, and who's the other one? The 6th rounder last year, Rodarius Williams. And maybe
household names.
Yeah, I just wrote about this. Nick McLeod, I think, who was with the Bills previously, and so yeah,
I'm sure that CeeDee Lamb, Michael Gallup, and co are just going to be licking their chops lining up for 4 quarters against those guys. No disrespect to Darius Williams and
no, of course not. And I mean, it just, yeah, it's tough, man. I mean, Wink Martindale's done a really good job overall with this group, but you know, when you have one position hit that hard, it really limits what you can do coverage wise and obviously matchup wise.
That is very true. And you touched a little bit on the Daniel Jones situation. Like the past few games, like the Seattle game and Detroit, like we've seen the old Daniel Jones stand up, and that's the last thing. You think that he's going to be back next? I mean, they didn't pick up his option. I can't imagine. Like I get that they got off to this fast start. I don't want them to be in a situation where they feel trapped and feel obligated to bring back Daniel Jones, who is an athletic guy, but makes questionable decisions. He's limited those this season, but I think a lot of that has been backed by the fact that he's had a really good running game and he hasn't been asked to do a lot. But if you're New York, I mean, I don't think that they bring him back.
I could see a 1-year type of deal. I mean, you know, whether it's franchising him, it's a lot of money. That probably would mean Saquon is not in the picture if that's the case. And, you know, then again, you also have to have a starting quarterback next year. And you have to decide, hey, are we going to go the Jimmy G route, or are we going to go, you know, some other
Derek Carr route? Maybe. I mean,
the Derek Carr route. Wouldn't that be interesting? His brother played for the Giants, you know, and yeah, there are those, the retread types, if you will, or you know, the veterans, or you could say, boy, we really like this guy in the draft, but by virtue of their record, they're not going to be in a great position to direct draft one. So yeah, you're right though. I mean, obviously Jones's turnover numbers being down, his running ability of, you know, getting him outside the pocket, all good things, but you know, still taking a lot of sacks and, you know, still leaving some meat on the bone, I would say. I mean, last week was one of his worst games in a while. Seattle, like you mentioned, wasn't great either. But yeah, it's there've been a couple games recently where you start to wonder a little bit.
Tell you what, though, I mean, Derek Carr, and this is looking way into the future. But Derek Carr on the Giants, I mean, that is a team that I would absolutely love to watch.
Sure, absolutely. I mean, Wandale had his best game before getting hurt. Depending on what they do with Saquon, obviously you have, a guy who's sort of been in the spotlight now for quite a while, being able to go to, a city like that and a franchise that I think would support him well. And, obviously familial ties as well.
Not having Josh McDaniels as your head coach, that's probably a nice tie-in too.
It couldn't hurt, right? So at least what we've seen so far. Oh man. I mean, the NFC East has obviously been really interesting this year. And yet, arguably two of the, half the teams of the division have questions at quarterback, right? Yeah. Just what the future is at Washington and New York.
How often when Tony Pollard makes these ginormous plays, what do you think that Jerry Jones' reaction is in the press box as he keeps trying to defend this massive contract that Ezekiel Elliott has?
Well, I tell you what, you think about the lucky situation we have here with, you got Zeke, you got Tony, we got a dream scenario. That's a bad impression, but I mean, Jerry, yeah, it's been a minute. Yeah.
I believe that.
I tell you, what he said. Somebody asked him about Odell Beckham. Would he go after him? He said, "There's a move to be made for the Cowboys to make us better. I'm burning the midnight oil to do it." It's just classic Jerry stuff right there. I once did a great feature on his bus driver. That was a fun story. Jerry's got a lot of stories involved in his life, but I mean, Pollard has been so good. I mean, you can make the argument that he's their, I don't know if he's their most indispensable player. That's Dak probably, but Lamb, if he goes down, they don't really have a number one. But man, Tony's been so good. And this whole talk they had a few weeks ago, I don't know what you thought of it, but basically putting a cap on him and saying, well, 15 carries, that's it. Can't play him anymore. Like, if you're in the Super Bowl, would you take that approach? Of course not. So I think they kind of took the training wheels off a little bit the last few weeks, and now he's getting 20 carry or touches, I should say, in a game. And it's like they realize maybe he can do a little more.
I think a lot of it comes back to the fact that Ezekiel Elliott's also a fantastic pass blocker, and that
absolutely
that gives Dak a little bit of an extra cushion. And look, if they keep using them, coherently the way that they did against Minnesota, then exactly. I mean, if you get Tony Pollard catching swing passes and taking him 60 yards, then who the hell cares? If he's the one getting it down to the 2 and Zeke gets in to punch it in, whatever.
Great. But have him be your short yardage back, and then have Tony be the star guy. Yeah.
And when it comes to like between the tackle stuff too, I mean, Zeke's probably a better in between the tackles runner as well. You can count on him to get positive yardage, where I think that Pollard has been the guy who's been kind of waiting in the shadows and not, necessarily developing as a pure runner. But what he's doing as a playmaker, catching balls out of the backfield, he's made his statement saying like, look, I deserve more. And I think Dallas realizes that, and they're giving him more. But at the same time, if you're paying a guy as much as you're paying Zeke, you want to make sure he gets his too.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, and that's the beautiful thing. They can use him for what he does well at this stage of his career. He's no longer a $15 million running back. Probably never was. But if you've got him and he's taking up that kind of a salary, a chunk of your salary cap, you might as well get something out of him, and while also not, forgetting about the other guy who's been so good.
Ezekiel Elliott's helmet, by the way, I despise it. Have you seen this new wave of helmets look like Power Rangers?
I guess I haven't. I haven't noticed. Jeez, I don't know. Yeah, I got to look at it.
Bad.
Is it bad? Yeah.
Oh, it's not good. Now, his has like a dark visor, so it's not too bad.
Oh, right.
I think it's Clyde Edwards-Helaire in Kansas City has the same one, but he doesn't have a dark visor. It's bad.
I mean,
give it a look when you can.
Both guys, not exactly trending in the right direction. I'm just saying,
Exactly.
I was a CEH fan too. I'll be man enough to admit that.
Yeah. Dallas 10-point favorites in this game. We kind of touched on it. It's either definitely going to hit or it's going to come down to the wire. There's going to be a lot of people kicking themselves.
Yeah, I'm right. And I mean, I think it's, correct me if I'm wrong. I think it's inched up too. I mean, like it started a little bit
I think it
lower,
started
maybe.
at like 9.5, somewhere like that,
Yeah.
and it went up.
Well, these injuries for the Giants, we've already ruled out 2 linemen, and we already, it doesn't look like a few other guys may be able to go. So, yeah, I'll be fascinated to see if they can hang for 4 quarters.
Yeah, that'll be fun to pay attention to. So let's talk about Patriots Vikings. That'll be the nightcap game. These two teams combined for a grand total of 0 offensive touchdowns this past week. By the way, I know that the fun thing to do this week has been to crap on Zach Wilson because of how he handled a press conference and how poorly he played. Mac Jones has been playing like absolute garbage, and he has just escaped that because of how badly Zach Wilson played. I, for one, am a little annoyed by that because Mac Jones has been bad.
Yeah, I mean, I think at least last week, you saw Mac like, completing passes. I mean, that's a good first step, right? And obviously, I could poke fun at our own, top 100 list in August, and number 85 on that list. Maybe it was a little premature putting Jones on the list as a rookie, but yeah, no, I mean, obviously, it's been a really weird year for him. I think, Belichick's done a pretty masterful job of burying the whole Bailey Zappi thing because, like you said, it's not like
Nobody's
he's,
talked about that since the Chicago game. Like that's just
yeah.
flown away.
I mean, that night when you watched that game, did you not feel like, whoa, this is a big deal, right?
Yeah, I mean, Mac Jones gets pulled. Bailey Zappi in 3 plays leads them to a touchdown, and everybody in Gillette's going out of their minds. And then Justin Fields
Zappi.
in the
Yeah,
offense
they're
happened. Yeah,
chanting. I mean, I don't know. It could be wrong. I grew up in New England, so I have some sort of connection to the team or whatever. But
yeah,
like just watching it, it was like this is a moment right here, and it really hasn't been a moment yet.
yeah.
So I'll be fascinated to see like if they, it's the Vikings defense that gives up plenty of yards. Obviously, I know it's a short week. David Andrews may not be able to go for New England. He's been banged up. He did practice, but it comes back to the Patricia Belichick, Joe Judge thing. I mean, I will say that when Zappi was in there, they looked a lot more comfortable from a play calling standpoint. A lot more. This is me talking. I've not heard this from anybody inside the organization, but it just felt like Patricia was kind of pushing Zappi as a way, like, this is my guess. He wants Zappi. Belichick's holding with Mac, and
Right.
they're gonna just sort of grind through it. But and now they get this Vikings team that all of a sudden we have questions about, and it didn't look like a great matchup to me in May or whenever the schedule was announced. But now obviously it's a kind of an interesting game.
I know that New England's got fantastically ranked defense and everything. Like Matt
Yeah,
Judon has been very good this year, and their secondary has been getting a ton of praise. But let me just point out the quarterbacks that they've beat this year. They beat Zach Wilson twice. They faced Sam Ehlinger. They beat Mitch Trubisky. Who else did they beat?
They beat. Oh yeah, they lost to 2 in the opener.
Lost to Lamar Jackson.
They beat Trubisky, you mentioned, right? They lost to Lamar, lost to Aaron lost to Aaron Rodgers. They beat.
Point being that any good quarterback they face, they have lost, and then horrible quarterback, they look like gods. I get it.
Good point. They have not beaten a good quarterback this year. You're right.
Yeah, I don't want to take full credit for that. I think who was that? I want to say that was Ben Solak that pointed that out.
He points out a lot of stuff. He's right on about that.
Oh, he's very good. However, though, I mean, nonetheless, I think that their numbers have been a little bit inflated. Just by the teams. I get that you can't pick who you face, whatever. But
the Vikings certainly have had luck in that regard.
Fantastic luck in that regard. Yeah. I do think that it's a little bit premature just to, write off the Vikings after the incredible run that they went on, beating Buffalo, regardless of the circumstances. I mean, you start off 8-1, 9-1, and that's hard to do in the NFL.
No doubt about it.
So I do think it's a little bit premature. Yes, they got smacked and they got smacked hard. But I do think that there's still, and especially in the NFC, I mean, a conference that, is very top heavy and still wide open. I think Minnesota will be fine. They're 2.5-point favorites in this. And I get that the joke about primetime Kirk is going to come out and everything. Yeah. I do like them to win this, especially at home. Mac Jones has been, his touchdown to interception ratio this season.
I just looked this up. I think it's like 4-6 or 4-7 or
4-7, yes.
Okay.
Averaging
Yeah.
198 a game, 80.8 passer rating. So it's not as if the New England Patriots are the 98 Vikings. So I do like Minnesota in this game.
I do worry about the offensive line for New England. I mean, that, especially, I don't know if, like Dalvin Tomlinson is going to be able to go, and that's been a problem. Teams have obviously run the ball kind of right at the Vikings with some success. And
by the way, the Vikings, I mean, they're without Christian Darrisaw too. So, I mean, that's,
True. Yep. Right. And I mean, right. So we got Isaiah Wynn, I believe, is out.
Yeah.
Has already been ruled out. Andrews very questionable. And they've been rotating up front this whole year. Penalties have been a huge problem in the offensive line. It's a unit that for so long was such a bedrock group in New England. Now it's a problem. But I have a feeling that the Vikings could give this one up late. I think early on you're going to see Justin Jefferson have some success, and New England will make their adjustments and try to slow the game down a little bit. If they get 2 touchdowns behind, it's going to be a problem. But I think if New England can keep it close, they have a chance to steal one late. I think they're better on special teams. I still think that defense is capable of making some plays. And, if the Vikings don't clean up some of their run defense stuff, then it's going to be a long day of Ramondre and Harris, and just going to be tough to continue corralling that unless they can just stack the box and dare Mac to throw deep.
Yeah, and I think if you're Minnesota, that's the biggest thing. Can you key in on the run game and make them, beat you with Mac Jones's arm? And if they can do that, then, I definitely like their odds more than, rather if, Ramondre Stevenson is running all over them.
Right.
Looking forward to a few games on Sunday. I do want to talk about the 49ers real quick, though, because I understand that it was a Colt McCoy-led Cardinals team. They've been kind of a mess all season long. However, doing what they did, the way they did it, I mean, Jimmy Garoppolo throwing 4 touchdowns, all those mouths in the offense getting reasonably fed.
Yeah.
Right now, man, like if I had to pick who's coming out of the NFC, I don't think I would pick anybody over San Francisco. Like I understand that Philadelphia is kind of the love child of the NFC right now. They're so stacked. They keep adding players that people forgot are available, and now he's just like, yeah, I'll take them, whatever.
Sure.
Like Linval Joseph and Ndamukong Suh in back-to-back days. Why not?
Oh yeah, those former Pro Bowl D linemen.
Yeah. I might as well add them, along with after I traded for Robert Quinn. What the hell? So I understand that they are loaded. I will say, there's something about having been there and done that I think does fall in line in favor with the 49ers. Like Jalen Hurts hasn't won a playoff game yet. Nick Sirianni hasn't won a playoff game as a head coach. Sure. And I think that I've said this a lot this season. They remind me a lot of the 2019 Ravens, where they just roll through the season with a dual threat quarterback who's a pain in the butt to game plan against. They don't really face any adversity. And then once the playoffs comes, they just get blitzed by a team, caught off guard, and then they go down.
Interesting.
So I do like San Francisco a lot right now. I think we know what Jimmy Garoppolo is. He's not going to be a world beater, but 15 touchdowns, 4 picks right now. He's, not turning the ball over. He's another guy who might leave a little bit of meat on the bone, but he's not going to give meat to the other team. That's a bad analogy, but you get what I'm trying to say.
He won't share his meat, right? Yeah.
Yeah. He won't share.
You know what I meant? Like a little sandwich, a little or something. Hamburger.
Yeah. Tomorrow's the day of sharing meat. So
that's right. We all share meat tomorrow.
Exactly. And the 49ers defense is loaded on every level too. There's just stars all over that team. I really like them. And if it comes down to, the NFC title game, there's a good chance that it goes through the Bay Area, depending on how seeding goes out. So 49ers are a team that I am very much keyed in on right now.
I'm glad you said that too. I mentioned earlier about Buffalo. The team I had them playing was San Francisco. Now, the team that I picked to win, to go to the Super Bowl had Trey Lance at quarterback and didn't have Christian McCaffrey. But yeah, I mean, I'm with you for all the core reasons you mentioned. The foundation of the defense. I knew if Lance went down, they had this sort of fortunate turn of events where Jimmy G would still be there. That made me feel better about the quarterback situation. Their creativity, not just in offensive design, but also, like you said, feeding all those mouths and getting people involved. It's hard to do. I mean, we always say, oh, they need more help around them and they got to add more weapons and stuff. Well, sometimes you get so many people in there that you overlook people in situations. And, George Kittle had the big game the other night, and you can throw it to Jawan Jennings if you need to. And McCaffrey doesn't have to carry the ball 20 times, but he can. And it just, obviously, if Debo's out, it doesn't kill them. So I love the McCaffrey remove from that perspective. Go for it. Go for a bowl, especially when, even with the Vikings and Eagles, it to me feels like anyone can almost come out of the NFC. And I'm with you. I'm not switching my pick. So I like this team a lot. And the sins of Chicago and Atlanta have been, washed away, I think, in the last few games.
Yeah, I think every team kind of has at least 1 or 2 games a year where they should definitely win. They just kind of let it slip away. They don't play well.
Yeah.
And plus, I mean, the week 1 game against Chicago was played on a water park, so I'm not looking too far.
I live here. I remember it well. Yeah, my backyard was like that, right?
Yeah. So they are a team that is. I mean, we know that they're well coached. We know how good of a play designer and play caller that Kyle Shanahan is. They're always going to be a pain. I mean, you throw Christian McCaffrey into that mix too. I mean, you touched on it. The first full week that he's with the team, he does something that hasn't been done since LaDainian Tomlinson in 2005, where he throws, runs, and receives for a touchdown. So they're finding ways to get everybody involved. And yeah, I mean, with all those mouths to feed, there's only so many guys on the other side that can try to contain them. So
yep,
they're going to be a fun team to watch. Hey, what's wrong with the Rams?
Wow, man. I mean, lots. Obviously, Stafford, the concussion stuff the last couple weeks, I mean, that's not the reason their season was derailed, but it's obviously not helped it. I think they should probably just shut the guy down or whatever. But offensive line issues, between injuries and ineffectiveness, the whole running back saga has been so weird.
Cutting Darrell Henderson when it seemed like Cam Akers was the more obvious choice,
the more cuttable of the two, if you will. Right? I mean, yeah, it's odd, and now maybe Kyron Williams or one of these other guys can help step up, but Allen Robinson hasn't really given him a whole lot. Defensively they miss the closers, the Von Miller types, and I mean, it's I don't know. There's probably a lot of reasons for it, but I think obviously not being able to be as prolific offensively when it's one guy carrying the load in Cooper Kupp and now he's out for the season. I mean, this is you got to give me a reason why Stafford should take another snap this year if you believe in him long term, or I mean, if you just trying to save face down the stretch, I don't know, but yeah, I mean, I think the convincing way in which their offense was controlled against the Niners and Cowboys early in the year, I thought not seeing a great, even the opener against the Bills, they were, badly outplayed, but it was by the middle of October, I thought something's kind of missing here. And it's just felt like that way. It's been a struggle for them to just get first downs at this point.
Yeah, it doesn't help that their offensive line can't seem to block anybody either.
Bad group right now.
Yeah, that's a very bad group. They're 15.5-point dogs to the Chiefs this weekend. So
with Bryce Perkins, I mean, good luck going to Arrowhead and try to, I mean, we saw obviously what's his name, Malik Willis have to do that a couple weeks ago, but I think the Titans have a little stronger other 52 than what Mr. Perkins has now.
That is very true. Could be getting Mike White officially named the starter for this Sunday for the Jets. We touched on Zach Wilson a little bit. Could be getting Mike White versus Trevor Siemian with the stuff going on with Justin Fields, potential ligament stuff, dislocations. I mean, we talked about shutting guys down. I don't know if you need to shut Justin Fields down for the season, but there's no reason that you play him this Sunday.
I don't. He's a tough kid, and I like you heard the stories. It's funny how he ends up playing. The Bears and Jets play, because you get to parallel the two situations of how Fields handled the end of his game. That they were apples and oranges, but it's just the idea that they both lost, and Fields is apologetic to the defense, and Eddie Jackson's telling, bro, don't worry about it, man. Like, we all are in this together, and complete opposite situation in New York. And they said they're benching him for performance, and no doubt they are. Yeah. But you can't tell me that the attitude part of it or something that happened behind closed doors didn't play a role. So Yeah, I mean, the Jets are at a really interesting flashpoint right now, and beating the Patriots and overcoming them is one thing, but this team showed some legitimate promise this year, and it's
Very
going to
good
be pretty
defense.
disappointing if they keep tailing. Sorry, what were you
Yeah, I
saying?
mean, yeah, no, I mean, if you're Robert Saleh, I mean, you're in a little bit of a predicament too, because
Yeah,
you risk, and I think it was Field Yates that tweeted this, like, if you keep starting Zach Wilson, then you risk dividing the locker room. If you
right.
bench
Yeah,
Zach Wilson, then you risk, okay, you know what? That's pretty much you saying, yeah, we're kind of we don't think he's the guy.
yeah.
So it's a tricky situation that I don't envy.
I
So
mean, what would you do? I look to me, if you were less than 90% sure that this guy is going to be the guy, I think you have to bench the quarterback and let him know, like, look, this isn't cutting it so far. I mean, Belichick benched Mac, I mean, what's the difference? I don't know. I mean, I find that far easier unless the kid is just you can't work with him, and then you figure out how to move him and move on to the next guy.
yeah, no, I agree. And I mean, for the Jets as well, I think it's a little bit more frustrating just because, okay, you know what? They tried Sam Darnold. That didn't work. They
Yeah,
traded away Darnold to basically draft Zach Wilson, say, all right, you know what? We're starting anew. And plus, I mean, he was injured the first month of the year with the knee that he
yep,
suffered the injury against Philadelphia in the preseason. So I think that kind of threw a wrench into everything too. But we saw what Joe Flacco was doing the first month of the year with this team, and I understand that he's only in his second year, but when we see, and maybe it's not a fair benchmark to compare it to, but when you see guys like Justin Herbert who just come in and light everything up like it's
right,
nothing,
yeah,
yeah, I mean, teams are definitely getting more impatient at the quarterback position than they were, 20 years ago when Carson Palmer was drafted number 1 overall and
didn't
he
play a snap.
didn't play a snap, sat behind John Kitna for a year.
Yeah,
So it's definitely a different league. If you go, top 2, top 5, you're expected to play, you're expected to progress. But it's also a different bring up for these guys. There's 7-on-7s, there's tons of camps. There's, the transfer portal. If you don't play right
right.
away, you can transfer somewhere else and play right away.
Great point.
So it's a different league, but it's also a different come up. And I think that's why these guys are expected to produce, right away. It's because, they've been the guy for, their entire life, basically. And,
Yep.
when you got different guys coming in that are playing well, then, I mean, how much do you think that they're kicking themselves right now for not taking Justin Fields?
Right. I think, and even as if you went back 2 months, well, heck, if you go back 2 weeks, Wilson outplayed Josh Allen. Now,
Yeah.
I mean, I'm just saying, like, there's obviously talent there. He went into Green Bay and didn't play well, but they won. And I mean, there were at least things like you felt like you could kind of hang your hat on with him and just say, all right, we got some stuff to clean up, but there's still a talent here. I feels
And
like a
that's what
lot
was
of that.
raved about him coming out of the draft. I mean, he's got a rocket.
Yeah.
We know that the arm strength's there. And I think for the Jets, it's just like, okay, it's one thing to have a guy that you can win with. I mean, Rex Grossman won a lot of games with Chicago.
Yeah.
Tim Tebow won some games, but can we win because of this guy, not in spite of this guy? And I think that's right now. I think they're kind of figuring out. Yeah, we're winning, but it's not because of him.
And just going back to him coming out, he was an unusual evaluation. He played well as a freshman, didn't play as well as sophomore, got hurt, which has now been a story each of his 2 NFL seasons, getting injured both years and missing little chunks of the year and having to awkwardly kind of fit back in. That was part of it. But then obviously in the 2020 season, I mean, I think Coastal Carolina was by far the best defense they played, and the next best wasn't even close. So, you kind of look back, he didn't play great in that game. He wasn't as bad as some people thought. So he's beaten up on, the kind of the dregs of the West Coast, and
Yeah.
in a weird season to begin with. When we started hearing that Wilson was going to go number 2, and I thought he would be a top 10 pick one way or the other. I just thought, oh man, there is a risk quotient with him that I don't know that I would feel entirely comfortable with.
That is a fact.
Yeah.
And look, whatever they do going forward, I do think that they do have the guy in Robert Saleh. He seems to be a guy that they really rally behind.
Hard
He's
not
been
to like him. I agree.
yeah, very hard to not like Robert Saleh. In terms of what they do in the future, though, Jimmy Garoppolo makes a lot of sense.
Yep.
There's connective tissue there, obviously, with Saleh. He's a guy that we touched on already. He's not going to be a world beater, but we saw what the likes of Joe Flacco can do in this offense. I mean, you give Jimmy Garoppolo that offensive line when it's completely healthy.
Right.
Michael Carter, Breece Hall. They brought over James Robinson. Like, they got three really good backs. What has Jimmy Garoppolo had his entire career in San Francisco? Good offensive line, a lot of good backs, really good weapons. Like, they've got all of that, and a defense that's young and has a ton of young talent that's played really well. So I think
they're trying to build like the 49ers, just see how they're building their team. It's very similar in a lot of ways. And so, yeah, he obviously, depending on what they do in the coaching staff, if there are any changes at OC, I mean, they could be very seamless for him there.
I asked Ben Raven this when he was on last week co-hosting with me. If the 49ers, like, let's say, even if they don't win the Super Bowl, if they make it back to the NFC title game, or if they make it to the Super Bowl, there's some real questions that are like, okay, do we bring Jimmy back again? Do we franchise it? Like, what do we do? Like,
yeah.
What do you think, like, what do you think the bar is in terms of, like, okay, if he clears this, he's coming back. If he doesn't, they're moving on and trying with Trey.
It was such a definitive Trey is our guy vibe at one point this offseason. And, the whole report about Jimmy didn't even have a playbook at one point. Yeah. Of course, Kyle's got to make a joke about it. Oh, I don't even have a playbook yet. Yeah, sure, buddy. You wrote the book, like you got an edition somewhere, right? So that was so prevalent. And obviously has, there have been some games where he's been less than great. Denver comes to mind, whatever. But now, as you pointed out, they've been on a roll. If they do get to the Super Bowl, it's going to be tough to be like, yeah, thank you, Jimmy. Here's your go watch. Enjoy, New York. And there's going to be a little trepidation. But then again, you were prepared to hand it off to Trey. You've invested so much to get him. I have a hard time. I mean, if he goes out and just plays Pro Bowl level ball and then wins the Super Bowl, geez, man, that might be really tough. I don't know, but it would make for a fascinating storyline. If they do get to the Super Bowl, that obviously is going to be a huge narrative that exists, and just speculating what he might do. And do they franchise him and trade him? Is he worth that much? Because remember, they couldn't move him this past off season.
Yeah, because of the surgery too.
Yeah, well, that too. Yeah, you're right. So a lot of factors. I really don't know. I really don't. It's a great question, though.
Jimmy Garoppolo and the 49ers are very, very interesting enigma throughout the rest of this year and into the offseason. Yep. Eric Edholm, hey, man, I appreciate you doing this with me. Before I let you go, what's the plate look like tomorrow? Is there a Thanksgiving? Is there a favorite food of yours on Thanksgiving?
I gotta choose my words carefully here, because I'm not cooking, so I'm a little bit of a food snob. But no, I'm not. I like dark meat. I don't like white turkey. I just don't. It's too dry for me. So I choose the dark meat. Not a big gravy guy. I have a little dollop maybe on the side. There's this kind of cornbready casserole type dish that is served at my wife's aunt's house that I like. So I'll be spooning out a few.
So you guys don't host. You go elsewhere?
We don't. We go to her family's house. We've done it even when we were dating. I think we did it a few years. So it's been a minute. I've been married 10 years now. So I would say 12 years I've been going there. So it's always fun. I think the COVID year was the only year that I hosted, but it's good. Yeah. My favorite dish that everybody else hates is green bean casserole.
Oh, dude, I love green bean casserole. It's so good.
I make my own, though. Like, I don't do the canned soup. I use fresh green beans. I make my own cream mushroom soup.
Oh,
I mean, we'll have you over sometime. I promise.
Okay, yeah, no, you know what? Whenever this becomes finally like a full-time thing, I promise you, I will make my way to Chicago and I will try your green bean casserole. That's
just for that. You won't even talk. We'll just eat.
Yeah, that's all. I'll just walk in and you'll know the deal. What do you do for the? You'd put the crushed onions on it, right? Like the.
Oh yeah. Okay. Yeah. Either You can make your own, a little cornstarch or flour and shallots and crisp them up a little bit, like almost like get like bacon quality
Okay.
crispy, but the canned ones are as good a substitute as you can find right there.
Are you a cranberry sauce guy?
I do, but I like making my own too.
You make your own cranberry sauce?
It's so easy. It's equal parts water and sugar. Write this down. Uh, Wash your cranberries. That's a big step. You got to get rid of all the dirt and all the stuff. They do sit in a bog after all. You get the simple syrup boiling. You put the berry or the cranberries in. A little orange zest, a couple squeezes of orange juice. Best you'll ever have. Better than the canned stuff, I promise.
I pitched this to Raven last week, and I think it could really take off, especially around the holidays. Cranberry sauce Jello shots. You just put like vodka and cranberry sauce, right? He was like kind of iffy on it. I think it's genius.
So I grew up in New England. There's a drink called the Cape Codder. It's like a vodka, cranberry, and lime, I think, if I'm not mistaken. In the summer, those taste so good. I mean, they're really refreshing.
Right.
I can taste the flavor of that right now. I think instead of the lime, we use maybe an orange. That's just a little squeeze of orange in there just to get the pristine flavor there. I'm in. I'll do 10 or 12 shots myself.
That sounds great. Nothing like getting hammered off cranberry sauce at your family Thanksgiving. Eric Edholm, hey, what do you got coming in terms of content in the next week?
Yeah, I starting to make some early Senior Bowl plans. I was talking to my editor about that today.
Are you going to be in Mobile?
I will.
Let's
be down.
Do the green bean casserole in Mobile. Oh, I'm in.
You know what we'll do? We'll rent a house and we'll make like we'll have a big green bean casserole party or something like that. I'm sure lots of people go to that. I
was gonna say, Thor Nystrom, I think, eats anything. I think
Thor would eat it. Yeah,
Thor would eat it.
There's no doubt. Like anything that's left over, like you could sit it out on the counter overnight and forget to put it in the fridge. He'd eat it. Yeah. So I'm looking forward to it, man. I love Mobile. I don't think I'll be getting to Vegas for the Shrine game, but I will be in Indy for the Combine, and I'll be at the draft and Kansas City, and maybe one or two other trips along the way. I'm not sure yet, but just crank it away as draft season approaches. I'm getting geared up for that.
Those are going to be a fun few months for us. I'm very much looking forward to all the off-season trips. Mobile's a very fun week. I have yet to do the Combine. I was supposed to do it last year. Financially, it just didn't add up, but this will be my first Combine. I'm looking very much forward to it.
We'll show you maybe the last one in Indy, so you're coming at the right time.
Yeah, I mean, I hope not. Everybody who I'm friends with in the media says if they move it away from Indy that they're going to be pissed. So hopefully it does not leave Indy.
Hey, let's do what Twitter quitters could not, which is like if the Combine moves, we just don't show up. Like legitimately move on and say, I'm not interested anymore. Bring it back and then we'll talk. That's how I'd treat it.
I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to actually seeing you in person when the time comes. It's going to be a fun time.
Yeah.
Appreciate you co-hosting with me. You are more than welcome to do this at any time. It's become a rotating chair of co-host because I don't like doing it by myself is what I've learned.
I don't blame you. I've had to talk for 2 hours before by myself. It's no one should be subjected to that. I promise you. So you're doing a great job. Happy to come on, and happy Thanksgiving to all your family and friends out there.
Well, I appreciate the kind words, buddy. Happy Thanksgiving to you as well. Send me a picture of the plate. I'll send you a picture of mine.
Yep.
And we'll do some comparisons. We'll do this again soon. Happy Thanksgiving to you, Eric Edholm, to everybody watching, listening, however you're doing it. I will be spending tomorrow eating and gambling. My mother is going to be so proud. We'll see you next time. This is the Pump Fake. Thank you.